You know, we all learn to count pretty early on when we're tackling a new language. But with Spanish, there are some really surprising traps hidden in plain sight. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain on the hidden rules of Spanish numbers that trip up almost everyone, starting with a question that seems to break one of the very first rules of Spanish grammar.
And this is such a good question because it feels like it just breaks the rules, right? We learned from day one that adjectives have to agree. If una has to match the feminine noun cama, then why on earth doesn't cuatro? It feels totally inconsistent, but as we're about to see, there's actually a fascinating logic behind it all.
So here's the secret. Unlike most adjectives, the vast majority of Spanish numbers are actually gender neutral. They just don't change their form. But, and this is a big but, there are two major exceptions. And once you know them, everything suddenly clicks into place.
All right, so let's get right into it. We're about to solve the first big piece of this puzzle with these two simple but absolutely crucial guidelines.
Okay, so the first exception has to do with the hundreds. Numbers from 200 all the way up to 900 act like you'd expect an adjective to. The default ending is cientos when you're talking about masculine nouns, like doscientos libros. But if the noun is feminine, you've got to change it to cientos, like in doscientas páginas. Simple as that.
The second exception is a bit of a shapeshifter. It's any number that ends in 1. We're talking 1, 21, 31, you get the idea. The number 1, uno, actually shortens to un right before a masculine noun, like un año, but it changes to una before a feminine noun, like una vez. And this rule sticks around even in bigger numbers, which is exactly why we say 31 mujeres.
And get this isn't just tricky for learners. Even native speakers can trip up here. The Royal Spanish Academy's own foundation points out that hearing 31 mujeres is a super common mistake. The correct way to say it is 31. That little final a makes all the difference.
Okay, just a quick heads up before we move on. Everything we've been talking about applies to cardinal numbers. You know, the ones you count with. 1, 2, 3. Ordinal numbers, the ones that show order like first, second, third, primero, segundo, tercero, they're a different story. They always have to change to match the gender of the noun.
All right, so we've tackled gender, but what about the really, really big numbers? Well, there are a couple of surprises waiting for us there, especially if you're coming from English.
First off, let's talk punctuation. This seems like such a small detail, but trust me, it can really throw you for a loop. In most of the Spanish-speaking world, they do the exact opposite of what we do in English. They use a period where we'd use a comma to separate thousands, and they use a comma for decimals. It's a total flip-flop.
All right, take a look at this number. That's a lot of zeros, 12 of them to be exact. Seems straightforward, right? But how would you actually say it in Spanish?
Right. In English, that's a trillion. Simple enough. But what is it in Spanish? Now, your first instinct might be to say trillón, but you'd actually be wrong. And this is hands down one of the biggest false friends between the two languages.
So what's going on here? Well, it all comes down to two different systems. English uses what's called the short scale for naming huge numbers, while Spanish uses the long scale. That means an English billion is mil millones, 1,000 millions, in Spanish. And a Spanish billón? That's actually what we call a trillion. It's a million millions. You can just imagine the kind of confusion that can cause.
And you might be thinking, wow, this is a lot to remember. But these rules are totally fundamental to the language. I mean, just look at this. It's a kid's math worksheet. Understanding how numbers work is a core part of learning Spanish right from the very beginning.
Okay, so let's put it all together. What we've really done here is build a powerful toolkit to help you navigate Spanish numbers with way more confidence and, hopefully, avoid all those common mistakes.
So here's your cheat sheet, the 4 main things you gotta remember. First, the hundreds from 200 to 900 change for gender. Second, any number that ends in 1 does the same. Third, don't forget to swap your periods and commas when you're writing numbers down. And finally, please watch out for that billion trap. A Spanish beyond is way bigger than you think it is.
Getting these rules down is going to put you so far ahead of the game. And honestly, it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If numbers, something we think of as so universal, can have these huge differences, what other obvious words out there might not translate the way you think?